Hello, hello, hello,
Oh my god,
everybody.
Spider. Holy shit.
Amazing. But
That was a sick intro.
yes, we are live. So welcome everybody. We have a lot of news to get through. So in case you've been living under a rock for the last half an hour, we have this news that there is going to be a new movie called The Hunt for Gollum. So as you can see right here, and it is starring and produced and directed by Andy Serkis. So big news out here. So we've got a lot to go through, but don't worry, we'll get into that. But firstly, we want to hear your thoughts. So we know that there's two movies. That's the update now. So originally, we'll go through your comments, don't worry. But originally we thought it was just going to be one, but now we know there's multiple movies, and we'll go through the press release as well. But yeah, Strider, seemingly as you have all the sets right there, I think I should let you start off.
All right. Well, yeah. These are my VHSs of the three original movies. I keep them on my shelf just for this specific day for the last 20 years. Yeah, this is amazing news. Like, I have to say, I just heard of this, so I'm just tuning in. I haven't actually read through all of this. Yeah, The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum is the interesting thing here is that there's already a fan-made movie that's called The Hunt for Gollum. That was actually pretty good. So I don't know, like I'm actually curious. I'll probably hear about this as the stream goes on. Like, how accurate is this? Because like my first thought was, okay, this is The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum. Like, it's literally the fan-made movie from like 10 years ago or so. So, but otherwise, like, if this is true, like, I mean, amazing news.
Well, to discuss whether you think this is true or not. So, The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum is currently a working title. So that's what we know so far. It is a working title, but yeah, it has come out from the studio themselves. I have the press released over here. Here we go, and have embraced the Lord of the Rings film trilogy with Andy coming aboard to direct The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum. We continue an important commitment to excellence that is a true hallmark of how we all want to venture ahead and further contribute to the Lord of the Rings cinematic history. And as we go down a bit, Mike DeLuca, where is he? He says something as well. One sec. Let me just quickly find it.
Okay, so this is Variety.
Yeah, this is the comments from the press release.
Okay.
So this stuff, look, these are the comments of Andy Serkis right here. So, and it's going to be, yes, Precious, the time has come. And he's also confirmed it on his Instagram as well. So this is all confirmed now. So it's not like rumors or source. Like I remember a few years ago, when all the young Aragon and stuff like that came out, it was all speculation, but here it is, confirmed fact. So, V, what's your first take on this?
My first take is that I want another title. I really love the idea of doing it like a prequel on the spin-off, like on Gollum and the search for it. But I think it's time for Lord of the Rings to divert from the title and to have like Middle Earth, the search for Gollum, for example, because I don't expect and I don't want to see any Sauron in it, or maybe just in the end when Gollum reaches finally like Mordor before the events of the Fellowship, probably. But like we have so many things called the Lord of the Rings, yada yada yada. So I understand why the choice is there, but since it's a working title, I would like them to change that and do it like Middle Earth, something else, or just do the search for Gollum, because Gollum is already a pretty known name. I don't think anyone will misunderstand what it is. So I just want to first get this out there. And then the other thing I'm thinking, are we going to see Ian McKellen coming back for Gandalf, or Orlando Bloom for Legolas, or Viggo Mortensen for Aragorn, because this is a few years, probably they're going to do the one where Gollum is escaping the mountains and Gandalf and Aragorn catches him, and then they go to Mirkwood, and then the elves lose Gollum because they let him play up a tree. So I guess we are seeing this story. And this story has a couple of known characters, also Lee Pace as Thranduil, maybe. So since Andy's Serkis is coming back and also directing the movie, I expect some of the old cast to come back, and I would love some of the old cast, because one of the things about both The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies that I love is the casting. Like in both movies, it's amazing. I cannot imagine anyone else playing Thranduil, except from Lee Pace, for example. And I saw in the comments a nice title from Marcus: Tales of Middle-earth, Search for Gollum. I like that a lot. Better than having, again, The Lord of the Rings. Because I don't believe it's the story of The Lord of the Rings. It's a story for someone involved in that, but at the same time, you have other aspects of Middle-earth. So, yeah, that's my take.
That's fair. And I feel like, yeah, I've just seen on Twitter the person who wrote the article that broke the news said The Hunt for Profit. So it just shows like how split, everyone's talking about, the title and how like it's going to be approached, these movies. But regardless, Ulmo, one thing we know about the approach is Peter Jackson will be returning in a producer role. So how do you feel about that?
I mean, he's very gifted when it comes to producing and also writing. I'm guessing that it's being written by him, right? And if Peter Jackson is connected to the project, then Philippa and Fran are probably connected to it as well, because it's almost like a package deal. But I do agree with some comments that I've seen that like the returning cast might be too old. I guess the only one that I would agree with is that I would accept is Ian McKellen, because Gandalf doesn't age and is like always old, so to speak. But seeing Orlando Bloom, even Orlando Bloom in the Hobbit trilogy was a bit old, and they were already de-aging him. But it wouldn't work as well. Viggo Mortensen is just, to me, it's impossible unless he's doing some cameo or something like that. But like, let's be real here for a second. It's a dream for all of us to watch Viggo Mortensen be Aragorn again, but it being the possibility, the likelihood is like extremely slim.
And I agree, and I feel like everybody else in the comments are thinking about what Peter Jackson's role could be and how it's going to be going forward, because we do know Andy Serkis is not only starring in it, he's also directing as well. So yeah, sliding back to that fact that we have Andy Serkis at the helm. How does that make you feel?
So just before I answer that, I would also like just to comment on something that we said. I think overall it might be a good idea to maybe, what did you say, like Tales of Middle-earth that somebody said in the comment. I think it might be maybe a cool way to go about naming the movie, but or the movies. But interestingly enough, this particular story might actually be the story where we do actually get to see the Lord of the Rings, because what happens is that Gandalf and Aragorn decide that Gollum has to be found. I mean, we kind of said most of that, and then at some point, Aragorn does catch up with him, but he catches up with him after Gollum has already been in Mordor. And in Mordor, he was interrogated personally by Sauron, which means that if the movie is from the point of view of Gollum, we might actually see the actual Lord of the Rings. We might actually see Sauron.
How I forgot this detail. Oh my god.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because Aragorn actually catches up with him in the how are they called? The Dead Marshes. I think that's when he manages to catch him, and then he travels from the Dead Marshes all the way to Mirkwood, and then after Mirkwood, at some point, that's the reason Legolas comes to Rivendell, is actually to report on some things happening in the Mirkwood, but also on the fact that Gollum escaped. So Gollum escapes actually fairly recently, not recently, just before the story of the Lord of the Rings, actually. So this might be an interesting way to tie in. And now, just to go back to the actual question about Andy Serkis, I mean, he has shown himself to be also a pretty good director. He did some things. He was also, I think, like basically the right hand of Peter Jackson during the Hobbit movies. I think he did a lot of directing there, if I'm not wrong. So I think it kind of makes sense that maybe they would try to go back. That one of the first things that they would try to do with this with this team of people coming back and having Andy becoming more and more of a director in the meantime, and also the fact that you don't really need. Given the fact that Gollum is a CGI character, you can still have Andy do the role, and we don't have to see the passage of time on his face. So I think it kind of makes sense that they would go for this. Personally, I don't care that much about this story. Like, I think it's cool, but I've seen it in a fan movie. It's great, but like, I would hope to see something else. But I do see the logic behind having Andy Serkis come back, given his biography so far, given how well his career went on, given that again, Gollum can be done with CGI, so it can be done perfectly. We don't have to see any difference visually. Even it can just look even better this time. So I think it's maybe not the coolest possible choice of a story, but given all of the circumstances regarding these people, I think it's a pretty cool, solid choice. Like,
But
kind of makes sense.
yeah, but as someone mentioned, I guess could be kind of safe as movie because we do know there are two as of right now. So that'll be, and hopefully it's not confirmed yet when it's going to come out. If Peter Jackson's going to be involved in it, though it seems like he will, because Philippa Boy and fans they're all writing on it. So it looks like it could be potentially something that we see this first movie, and then maybe the bigger thing. I know someone again mentioned what's it called, a Angmar War, etc., something like that. So that'll be very, very interesting. But we've got a question here. I'm gonna see if anybody wants to tackle it. Do you guys think they will recast Aragon? Anybody want to have a little
I
go at
mean,
that?
sure. I mean, I would say Strider would take it because the name, but in my opinion, it's 100%. There's no way that Vigo is going to. I'm not saying that he doesn't want to come back. Let's just clarify that there's a difference between wanting to come back and actually being a possibility. In this case, it's not a possibility because I mean, no offense to Vigo, but he doesn't look like the same way he looked 24 years ago. It's just so
Well,
I think they're going to recast him.
They should cast Strider.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I just need a wig, obviously, and then I need a
I
big
mean,
one.
you
Yeah.
will be wearing a wig anyway, so.
Yeah, I'm getting to that age. If we convert the normal mortal man into Dunedain, I'm getting into the proper age for that. I don't know. I think, I mean, I think it's definitely a good point that he obviously has been, 20 years, 21 years since the last time he was Aragorn. But I don't know. I think so. If let's assume for a second that the story will follow a similar plotline like the fan-made movie, because like the fan-made movie, we keep going back to it because first of all, it's a fantastic work of people who love Tolkien, and as such, it deserves absolute praise because they actually did an amazing job. But the title itself is fairly clear what the movie is going to be about. So if it does cover all of this, Aragorn will be in the wild. He will not have to look very kingly. So I think there might be some room there for maybe actually getting Vigo back, because like the technology, there has been some de-aging of character. Like, they did the whole Indiana Jones movie. I'm not saying that the de-aging technology looks great, but I think also maybe with some good makeup, perhaps, like maybe doing some practical stuff with makeup and, like the hair, the wig and so on, I think it could be doable. I think Ulmo does. You absolutely made great points. It might not, like I think there's like a gray area where it might happen, it might not. Honestly, I think it would be really cool to have all of them back. I think Lee Pace could still do his Tranduil. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be possible, and I think we all would. If they go with the old cast, I think everybody would be happy. Like I want to see Aragorn. I want to see Viggo Mortensen doing Aragorn again on screen. I mean, he would be Strider more at this point in time. I think everybody would be happy with that, and everybody would be happy to like kind of like squint a little bit and just pretend that there aren't any things happening on foreheads of these actors. Yeah, I think it's possible. And Kyle has a good question. I'm not sure how Henry looks like. If we can maybe get the photo, maybe we can talk about that.
No, I don't think so, because there was a discussion about it in the comments earlier, but I don't think his son could take the role. But one remark I had about this, it's an idea actually because of the War of the Rohirrim. They are making Eowyn narrate the story, so they're bringing back Miranda Otto. So maybe they could bring back Viggo Mortensen in narrating the story as well, and like do by his deathbed something sort of story, or telling this to his kids when they were young, and basically something like this. I don't know. It will be a bit too much, to be honest, because it will be the first movie, and also it will be right after War of the Rohirrim, which is another Warner Bros. Made movie. So it will be kind of dull to do it basically two times, one in animation and one in live action. So I don't know if it's a possibility of doing that. But it's the only way actually that I see possible and realistic for Viggo Mortensen to be coming back as Aragorn. But I do agree that we can easily see Ian McKellen and Lee Pace back to their roles. I don't know about Orlando Bloom, to be honest, as Legolas, because we saw him coming back for The Hobbit, and it wasn't really that good in the aging, I guess. But I think it had more to do with the context that they used. They were too blue, but I think we could see Legolas coming back as well.
Interesting.
So,
I agree. I think that would be an interesting possibility. Another possibility, Helen. Hi, Helen. We're in chat. I'd say we will see Nazgûl, and if they're behind the Gollum escape. That's quite an interesting thought there. Anybody have any thoughts? I'm sure with movies that it's going to try and like involve as many things from Lord of the Rings, from the movies as possible. So anything we'll see the Nazgûl by any chance? Uma?
That's actually something I was thinking about this as well, because although we have seen some Nazgûls in the movies, more so in the Hobbits, actually, surprisingly, than in the Lord of the Rings. But there's many things. I mean, I haven't read the books, don't kill me. But there's many things that the Nazgûls do or did that have not been shown or mentioned. Like the fact that they're extremely stealthy and that they're like a cloud of darkness in some ways. And I think they could be very interesting to include that in the movie, or to show how they work beside the just riding a horse and getting overwhelmed by Arwen and stuff.
Just to confirm, do you all hear me now?
Yep.
I have to restart my stream. I'm not sure. I didn't catch everything Wilma said, but I think what happens in the books, so it's part of Legolas's report, is that So they would take Gollum out to climb trees, and that was like always Elvish guard guarding him. And there was this one particular tree that used to be like, I think, a bit further from other trees, and he started really liking to climb on that one. They're elves. They're like, okay, you need some fresh air and so on. We're gonna get you out, and then they would do this periodically. And then at some point, I think there was an attack while he was outside on one of these walks. And yeah, it might be interesting to see that there's a Nazgûl leading a group of orcs and just ordering them to attack in order to free Gollum. I think it could be possible, especially because we would need probably some kind of villains, antagonists in this story. And while we could technically get to see maybe Sauron if they go about it that way, as I said earlier, Nazgûl would make a lot of sense to be fair. So yeah, maybe we even see Witch King again.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I think that's an exciting possibility. And the Hunt for Gollum originally took place over several years. The film would need to move faster. I'm sure it's going to be like
right.
Frodo moved to Bag End, and that 17 years got cut. Sorry, not from Bag End, and then that whole process got cut down by 17 years. So something like that, probably.
Yeah, I was actually going to say earlier, this might be an interesting. We could get actually a detective story here, because again, if the movie is going to be from Aragorn's or Strider's standpoint point of view, like that's a great point. That the hunt did take several years. I think maybe not several years. For some reason, I think it's maybe like 1 year, but it might be a couple of years definitely. And yeah, it could be like a cool detective work because he would have to go around trying to find his trail, and it took a long time actually for that. That's definitely true. And we could get some detective work done by Strider as the Ranger Strider, because he wouldn't be Aragorn. Like he would be in his Strider mode as a Ranger here, and that would be very interesting, especially because there's also some reference. I think it might be during this chapter, Council of Elrond, when maybe Legolas or Gandalf is talking about this story of how they were looking for Gollum, and how there were rumors of a ghost sneaking into houses and taking children from their cradles and so on. Like there are scary things like that. So we could have like a detective story in a way of hunting Gollum. And I think this was also an interesting question, but maybe someone else want to take it first regarding the dead marshes and flashbacks.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Anybody want to tackle that?
I can get into it
Sure.
because I think it's kind of a stretch to basically have a movie into a movie, because I don't think the Dead March's origin story and flashbacks from that really blends in with Gollum. I mean, if it was more about Mirkwood, yes, I could see it, but from the working title that we have now, we basically have more of an idea that it will be either Aragorn and Gandalf hunting Gollum, and then having some scenes in Mirkwood where Gollum will be captured and then freed by the Nazgûl. So it doesn't give a lot of wiggle room to go even deeper into what has happened to the Wood Elves, to Thranduil's dad, and all that. It's kind of a stretch. I would mostly see it as a different movie, to be honest. Like, seeing the origin of the Dead Marches would be absolutely amazing. Don't get me wrong. But I don't see it in this particular movie. So, yeah.
I think that sounds good. Yep, that sounds good. And we we've already got so many different possibilities. But yeah,
I think there might be some wiggle room there because if you remember that Gollum or as he was more like Smeagol at the time, when he was leading Frodo and Sam through the Dead Marshes, he does talk about. I think in the books it's in more details. It's a bit more sinister, and he does kind of mention that there are these ghostly things in a way. There, it's kind of implied. It's not specifically said, but it's like it says like these lights, these people, they will show you their lights or something like that. So I don't know. I think there might be room for like a very quick flashback of sorts. Maybe when either Aragorn or Gollum are interacting with something in the Dead Marshes, they might bump into like a dead body. You know, like I'm thinking of those very quick moments where, you know, like when Gandalf touches the Palantir in Fellowship of the Ring or something, like, you know, like maybe some very brief scene of something like that. I think it might happen, but you know, I think he's right. Like we wouldn't probably get like a proper, you know, like flashback sequence that goes on for a couple of minutes. Probably not. But I think there might be room for like some little haunting flashback or something like that. I think that might be really cool actually to see.
Indeed. But I feel like this is the part now where I feel like I know I hinted at it on Twitter, but we do have some updates, exclusive you might say as well. So I'll go through that now. So let me find it. Okay, here we go. So from what I've been hearing, and normally I don't give our sources away from where we're hearing this from, but all I'd say for this one is that it's coming from someone, because there's like that, I think over 100, there's so many. It's coming from a lawyer or ex-lawyer who was a part of the legal teams that work with the rights, given it from like the talking state from Embracer with Amazon, with Warner Brothers. So there's someone quite in there, and they have said that for this new movie, it's an original. This is verbatim what I just got told. It's an original storyline loosely inspired by the idea that Gandalf and Aragorn tried to find Gollum. And Amazon owns the rights to adapt the books into movies. Warner Brothers can do spin-offs based on the existing films they made, so their own movie universes will stick within the movie universe. And Warner Brothers has the same levels of rights that Daedalic Entertainment had, because that got leased by Embracer, and that's the same thing that's going to be leased to Warner Brothers. But this is all allegedly right now. So, but it is going to be interesting that with that. And the second thing I can mention is that, and we've known this for quite a while, but we were waiting for it to come official. Peter Jackson met with the Warner Brothers and Embracer execs in January this year. So he met with them, and the first two things they pitched to him was young Aragorn and young Gandalf. His advice to them was that this was with Jason DeLuca, another exec, then two Embracer execs, and I actually have the tweet saved. So actually I can even pull out. Let me find it. So yeah, they met in January. This is when it got decided. I'll make a tweet out about this soon, anyways. So this is what our tweet would have read. So it would be, I know you can't see on screen, but we'd been saving this tweet for a while. One exclusive Warner Brother execs, Jason DeLuca, and an unidentified female executive, plus two Embracer representatives, met with Peter Jackson in Wellington, New Zealand in January 2024. They last met in early 2023. The investors loosely pitched some ideas to the veteran Middle-earth director, including young Aragorn and young Gandalf movies. Peter Jackson allegedly advised against the idea of origin stories to the execs, but if they went ahead with that concept, then he would always be there for advice if needed. So that's an interesting development. So this all got decided in January this year. And what do you guys think of Peter Jackson saying that they shouldn't go for this origin story route where they're basically going to go back into the past and history? We have like an event. So yeah, those were the two things that were originally pitched. So excited to hear what you guys think about that.
So I was a bit away. Could you just please repeat just the last bit? What was his idea?
So the two pictures were young Aragorn, young Gandalf. Peter Jackson allegedly advised against the idea of these origin stories and opted for the hunt for Gollum instead. So that's basically what's happened.
Okay,
So yeah,
I guess.
how's everybody's thoughts on that?
I think Peter Jackson is not stupid. I think that's a very clever response to it, because nowadays, once a movie gets out, and it's bombs, and they want to make like spin-offs, backstories, flashbacks, and all that good stuff. I mean, we've seen it with Harry Potter. We're going to see it with the John Wicks. We're seeing it with Star Wars. But more doesn't automatically equal to better. Let's just put that out there, because they want to recreate the lighting in a bottle kind of thing, but that's not something that you can create 10 out of 10 times. And I think that telling them that they should not do it is actually really clever, because the only thing that you're gonna get out of it is that you're going to stain what they already had, right? Everyone knows the Lord of the Rings trilogies as like one of the best trilogies ever made, and all that stuff. And the Hobbit trilogies, arguably, they're like average, if not like worse than the Lord of the Rings. Therefore, trying to push more products out and not being able to uh, make it sure that the product is good is only going to make it worse for you. It's going to stain the products. And a good example for that is Star Wars, right? I mean, I haven't really watched much Star Wars recently, but I know that the Force Awakens trilogy was not always very well received. And while it's for the fans and it's a fan service, the kind of thing, it's not always better that way. So
No, I agree. And V, you?
I think like the best quote to come out from today is Peter Jackson is not stupid.
Yeah.
That's definitely a point. So I can see young Aragorn. I don't understand young Gandalf because, as someone said in the comments, young Gandalf is basically when he was in Valinor as Olorin. So where the origin begins, because if they do like an origin of Gandalf in Middle Earth and call it something like young Gandalf, etc., then someone can make a young Gandalf origin in Valinor. So it doesn't make sense unless you're going back to Valinor, which we know it's not happening because they don't have the rights for that. As for young Aragorn, again, how far back do you go and where do you start? Because you can start from the moment he was born in Rivendell under the watchful eye of Elrond, and how he grew up with the elves and his education, how then he became a ranger and joined the Dunedain, and how he protected the whereabouts of the Sire, how he went with the Rohirrim in Rohan, and went then to Osgiliath for to fight alongside to Boromir's army, etc. So I guess since we are deciding to start with Gollum, if they want to do so many origin stories, it's a very bad beginning because you are not going far back or back enough to start. But if we see all this extensive Middle Earth universe at some point in the middle of it, then you basically have the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, and then you have the trilogy of The Hobbit. And then you understand that The Hobbit is actually the starting point of the prequels. So are you going further back from The Hobbit? Or are you staying within the 50 years between Hobbit and Lord of the Rings? Which they have the most stories to tell, basically. And all before Hobbit is mostly speculations from the Third Age and the Rings, the chapter that you have in the Silmarillion, and some of the things from the Unfinished Tales, and some of the things from the appendices. And you don't have much. You mostly have timelines with little and titles of what happened each year for significant events. You have family trees, you have names, you have sometimes titles of events, but you don't have much of a text. So the problem with all of that is that you're making a very extensive Middle-earth universe when someone else also has rights in it, and we have the Rings of Power series going right now, which tackles mostly the second age from the appendices. So you already have some work out there from the appendices. And I don't see why this is happening, and it's so complicated. But I love that we have Middle-earth content. But it's getting a bit too much. And we are going into waters like MCU and DC and Sony having different characters from comic books, and I think we will see a repeat of the Spider-Man movies and of the X-Men and of the Fantastic Four situation that happened in the comic book environment. And I don't know how much I want that, to be honest. So if they tell us that Peter Jackson is doing just third dates and Warner Brothers are doing just third dates stuff, and then you have Amazon doing first and second dates because it has some Rings of Power has some parts from the first date, and at some point in history you get the Tolkien estate to give over the Silmarillion rights to someone to do the full first dates and the Silmarillion. Then that will be very interesting because you will have very different artistical views in Middle Earth in each age, which will be actually quite amazing in my opinion, because each age will have its own voice. And I've been talking for far too long, I think. So I will leave it at that.
And yeah, and I think you covered it well. So I feel like the best way to explain this, because I know it's a bit of confusion. So what happened was Embracer were in a lot of trouble. So they went to New Zealand, and the final thing was, can we make a Lord of the Rings movie with you? Have you involved in it somehow? Peter Jackson, basically. And then they came to him and said, the execs, and they said, okay, we're thinking of stuff like young Aragorn and young Gandalf movies. Then Peter Jackson said back to them, allegedly, that it is not really not the fans, but like what the Lord of the Rings community needs right now is what's it called? Is having more origin stories and stuff, because of course Rings of Power, a lot of that is original. And he said against it and said, okay, if you are going to go through this still, I'll always be there if you need any help or support if they wouldn't go his way. But again, it looks like they listened to him, they took his advice, caved in, because the Hunt for Gollum is not an origin story. It is based on something in the book. It's based on a period of time that happened before the Lord of the Rings, and that's why he's now come on as producer. So it's actually a really big part that Peter Jackson, looking back, has played in the future of these movies now. And I know people speak about him being in this like Kevin Feige world, but this is currently doing that because I feel like they've now listened to him. They thought it wouldn't be correct, and have taken and went for their first pitch to be the Hunt for Gollum, and that's very exciting. And Strider, I'm just wondering, can we still hear you? Are you still here?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you. So what's your thoughts on all that then about Peter Jackson, like saying having this more origin stuff is not and having them push away from this young idea back to something based within the text?
Yeah. Well, I think for the first of all, regarding young Gandalf, as someone just said in the comments, yeah, like there is no such thing as young Gandalf, because Gandalf is a timeless spirit who just came to Middle Earth and got the body of an old man on purpose. So he would always look like this as long as he's being the Gandalf person. I think the young Gandalf, let's call it like that for the sake of simplicity, doesn't make much sense because Gandalf doesn't work as the main character. Like, he is there as the mentor figure. He is there as a guide, someone who is like one of the main characters, but he's not. We don't see the story through his eyes because he needs to have a character arc, right? And what's the character arc of Gandalf? Like, I mean, you could argue for some, but it would be very hard to actually create a good movie that's following Gandalf as the main character. I think as like the main character. But regarding the young Aragorn situation, because we can say young Aragorn, he does have quite a career in the decades before the Lord of the Rings. So, I think one of all the ideas we have heard, in recent years, even when Amazon announced that they are doing something, but we didn't know yet what. That was one of the ideas floating around, and of all of those, that's the one I could actually see being like material for a proper story, because he grows up in Rivendell as an orphan. I mean, okay, his mother is there, but like he loses his father. His father dies when Aragorn is like 2 or 3. He grows up there, and then when he turns, I don't know, 21 or 22, he starts wandering around the wilderness with Elrond's sons, and then eventually he comes to Rohan, serves under King Tengel, who is the father of King Theoden, and then after that he goes to Minas Tirith, to Gondor, serves as Thorongil there under Denethor's father, and this character arc could kind of finish as he, or at least this story arc could finish as he leads Gondor against the Corsairs of Umbar, and he manages to like sack this harbor, which is like in the far south. So I think there could be a story there for sure, but I think in order to avoid stepping on the toes of the Lord of the Rings movies, they could go for how to say that, like like, okay, we are doing this aesthetically, it's going to look the same, but we're going to have different actors, and we will say that this is not exactly the strict continuity of the movies, just to like say that ahead of time, so everybody knows, okay, this is the story of Aragorn, but it's not necessarily maybe the Aragorn of the movies, because the movies, they kind of have their own universe of their own, they have their own kind of continuity, so it might be a good idea to do something like that. But I think of these two, definitely young Gandalf or Gandalf in the earlier age doesn't make sense, but I think young Aragorn could, because there's a lot of material there to actually create a story, because you can have his rivalry with the young Denethor, for example. You can have him meet King Theoden as a kid, like a 6-7-year-old kid maybe, or something. Like, I think there's potential there, and then you can have Gandalf there show up still as a mentor figure of sorts. You can have even Saruman appear there.
I agree. No, and I feel like, again, it just goes back to that point. There's so much they can integrate and include, and that's what's basically going to be the next few years now. Sounds crazy to say years, but like that's what's going to be like, having to discuss and see what they could include, speculation, all that stuff. But no, this is all very exciting stuff, and I'm happy that we were able to also provide an update on this as well. So more context around it. So basically, I feel like for me, it's off to a good start that they listened to Peter Jackson. So great stuff. But I feel like we should go back to final thoughts now. So yeah, before we wrap up, first of all, leave your final thoughts in the comments and we'll put them up on screen. But I'll start with you. How are you feeling now going forward and stuff like that?
Honestly, mixed feelings, because from the one hand, I'm really excited to see more of Middle Earth. On the other, I don't know how this will go. I'm very, very cautious about this. And also with Peter Jackson getting involved again, I'm not sure how safe it is, because we have Lord of the Rings on the one hand and then Hobbit on the other, which I love the first movie of the Hobbit trilogy. I don't like the rest of the two, or I'm like mid about them. And also, I want to see new people getting involved with Lord of the Rings in general, Middle Earth, and seeing new views about it. So there are a lot of people that have been involved with Middle Earth in the past, on the top of the like producers and Andy Serkis, of course, and the rest of the people, and that's why I think it's time for a bit of a fresher look on it. And for example, in War of the Rohirrim, they have new people that weren't as much involved, and they have old people as well. So I'm waiting until we see more of the writing team and the rest of the team in this new movie. And let's say I'm cautiously optimistic about it. So that's will be my wrap.
Sounds good. Yep, for that's a fair take, really fair take. Uma, you?
I think that the release date of 2026 is a bit optimistic. I'm gonna be honest here. I don't think, maybe it's just a way to tease the fans and like, oh, it's close by and whatever. But if they don't have a script yet, if they don't have a cast yet, they're not even in pre-production yet, there's no way that this is going to get released in 2026. I mean, Lord of the Rings, the trilogy took like 6 years of pre-production, and even if we go with the extent of it's not going to take as much and whatever, nowadays movies, especially of this caliber, are going to take at least a year or two in pre-production to write the script, to find the cast, to find the crew and stuff like that, and then another year and a half for post-production. So I would say if we get the movie before 2028, it's already a very good thing. But it's also going to be rushed if that's the case. So what I want to say to the fans is like, be excited, sure. Be cautiously optimistic, sure, but don't rush it. And that's what I want to say to the creators as well. There's no reason to push it for 2026 release when you can do it 2028 and it's going to be better, or the story is written out better, or the effects are done better, you know.
Very fair take. Yep, indeed. Strider, finally you.
Well, I just want to say the cautiously optimistic is exactly the way I was explaining. I was describing myself prior to the Rings of Power for like a year. About a year, I was always saying I'm cautiously optimistic, cautiously optimistic. I will say I am optimistic this time because this is a proven group of people who defined what we think of Middle Earth as is on screen. So these are the people who set all the foundations for this. I mean, okay, shout out of course to the animated adaptations before this, but because they did also inspire some of the Lord of the Rings. But like we're talking about the big screen, live action. These are the people who defined it. So yeah, optimistic. I think there's room for cool stuff there. I think it's also good that we have two different companies, let's say, creating the Lord of the Rings content, because that makes them step it up. They need to create good content, good Lord of the Rings content, because if let's say for the next 15 years, Amazon and Warner Brothers starts, both sides are creating the Lord of the Rings content. They have to compete with each other, which means they have to give us the good stuff. They have to give us quality stuff that honors Tolkien and everything, and all these other elements of it. So I think that's good because Amazon will now have competition. I think that there's room for these stories to be good stories, to be put well on screen, because I think also this time Veta or Vita, I don't know how it's pronounced in English, Veta Workshop from New Zealand, they already exist. They're already a hugely established leader on the market regarding production of movies of this scale. There's already, I think, a lot of stuff that they can they don't have to start from the exact beginning of creating this. I mean, Ulmo does absolutely make a good point that this takes time, but we can also one thing that we should also bear in mind is that maybe all of this has been happening for like a year now, perhaps, and only now they're coming out because they think, okay, Peter Jackson's script and plan is already making sense. Like we gave it time to see if it will come to a point where we can say, okay, this is actually really good. Let's do this. Maybe they waited a bit extra before announcing these things, which means that maybe all of this is already kind of being worked on in a way. But I do agree that 2026 is earlier than I thought it would be. But then again, like, we've been hearing these stories for like months now, like about the new Lord of the Rings movies. So yeah, I think it could work, especially like, for example, if they go for like the winter release of 2026, or like for Christmas release, that's 2.5 years from now. If they're already kind of setting up some of these things, I agree with Ulmo. It's kind of early. It's good. Hopefully it's good that it's early like that. But yeah, hopefully they pull a wizard and arrive exactly when they mean to. So yeah, optimistic.
Perfect. And yeah, I feel like it's gonna be an exciting time now. But straight away, one final thing. What do you think of the producer role that PJ has? Do you feel that's the perfect position for him?
I think that is the perfect position for him. As I said, like he as the lead visionary, but of course with his team of people, with the people who work with him on the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Like the Hobbit movies, they are flawed movies, but they are flawed movies when you put them next to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because that trilogy is absolutely one of the pinnacles of cinema, of cinematic history. If you put aside the Hobbit movies, they're pretty good. Like they're fun movies. They're not on this level of masterpiece that the Lord of the Rings movies are, but they're still pretty solid movies. I mean, myself, I'm a fan of one particular fan edit that I really like, and I think there was clearly good stuff in there. There was also a lot of background stuff going on that made these movies more troubled than they should have been. But yeah, I think the producer role is really good because he has proven to know how to put Middle Earth on screen in a really, really good way. And again, even the Hobbit movies had a lot of good stuff in them if you look past the annoying stuff and CGI and so on. So I think this is pretty good because it gives the opportunity for other people who are, like other directors like Andy Serkis, for example, who can give us their kind of vision of this. But having Peter be there to kind of steer the wheel, I think that's great news. I mean, that's the best news we could get for upcoming the Lord of the Rings movies. Honestly, like we cannot get better news than, hey, Peter Jackson is actively involved and has a very big say in things. I think that's just the best news we could get if we are going to have new The Lord of the Rings movies, which it seems like we are.
Indeed. And time will tell how this all plays out. But I want to thank everybody for coming in today. I know this is really early, most of you probably at work or something like that. But it'll be fun times coming ahead, and I'm sure it will be. So, and also on Rings of Power front as well. There'll be some good stuff hopefully coming soon as well. But that's about it. I want to thank everybody here, and we will see you in the next one. So bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.